The elective conference of the ANC's biggest region, KwaZulu-Natal, is underway in Durban. It's all part of the build-up to the December National Elective Congress, where the party will elect its national leadership. The ANC in KZN says it's anticipating a dispute-free conference, but it's a difficult time for the party and its leadership, with much division and uncertainty to navigate as it looks ahead to our next general elections in 2024. I'm joined now by Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, the University of the Western Cape Political Science Professor and Deputy Dean of Research. Professor, thank you so much for your time this evening. So, firstly, there have been some calls for the credentials process of this elective conference to be open to the public to avoid later litigation. Do you think it's going to be a dispute-free conference?
Thank you very much, my sister, and good evening to your viewers. Given what has happened in other provinces, we saw what happened in the Eastern Cape, for instance, and we saw what happened in Gauteng recently. Except for Limpopo, where things went smoothly, there have been some glitches. So it's critical, therefore, that the ANC spends a lot of time attending to these credentials, because it's no use rushing to continue the conference when there are still some issues that might surface at a later stage. Because then it would mean that whatever results that come out of this conference will be nullified if ever there is something that went wrong during the credentials process. So it's critical that they do it now rather than later.
There are lots of names flying around with different slates. How secure is the current chair, Sihle Zikalala?
That is a very interesting question, partly because we have a number of potential candidates who are vying for this position. And the question is, are they genuinely running for this position, or are they strategically trying to deplete the votes, or at least split the votes, and then, of course, only to find that behind the scenes they are working together with the person who appears to be the contender? So that is a very critical question which we are not in a position to answer right now. But as things stand, Sihle Zikalala, as the current chairperson, has in fact an edge over others by virtue of incumbency. And then, of course, it depends on how he is prepared for this position. Because if you look at the other contenders, if I take, for example, the likes of Durban does command enough support. But then recently, you might have heard that the Hawks visited her, or at least wanted some answers from her, and that raised questions as to what the real issues are. But then putting that aside, she's still a good contender for this position. Then we have Sandile Zungu. That is the most controversial one for me, because at one point he indicated that he was going to contest this position against Sihle Zikalala, and then later on he said no, he's pulling out. Only on Tuesday did he come forward and then confirmed that he's running. So it means that on the one hand, I would say Sihle Zikalala is safe in the sense that the other contenders are not necessarily convincing to be contenders, except for Durban. As for the rest, I'm not too sure if indeed they want to run against Sihle Zikalala, or if indeed they are pushing a particular agenda, which we might not be aware of at this stage.
After the recent passing of Party Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte, the party has been very vocal about saying they need to increase their support for women in order to achieve some sense of gender parity. In a province like KZN, which is very patriarchal, what are we expecting to see in terms of real honest support for female candidates, not only for the leadership, the chairperson position, but in terms of the leadership positions in that province?
I think that they have to take a cue from what happened in Gauteng. Gauteng made history. Of the top 5, 3 are women, and that is unprecedented, and it's a good move. But then, coming back to your question, in the case of KwaZulu-Natal, obviously it can't just translate into something similar happening in KwaZulu-Natal, because there are a number of dynamics at play. For example, if you look at the contenders for the chair position, you'll find that there aren't so many women, there are more men. And then the question is, will those men be running together with other men, or will they also bring women on board? Because whether you like it or not, slate politics will be at play. I've heard politicians denying that, saying that we are uniting the party, we are busy rebuilding the party. That is political rhetoric. The reality of the matter is, it's slate politics. So then if some women happen to be on the quote-unquote the correct slate or the right slate, then they stand a chance. But then if the playing field is open, I don't see a lot of them being elected into these positions. They might, of course, take a cue from Gauteng, as I've said, but it's not a given that it will happen just because it happened in Gauteng.
With so much division in the process, evident in that number of slates contending, we're definitely not likely to see a clean sweep. But these provincial elections for leaders, they have a massive impact on the national picture. And there are some very interesting players in KZN. We're talking about former Health Minister Zweli Mkhize, former Durban Mayor Zandile Gumede, and former President, still powerful, Jacob Zuma. So how influential are they in this whole process and then knock on the bigger picture nationally?
The individuals we have just mentioned are indeed an important factor in this election in KZN. You may recall, of course, that a number of these contenders have visited former President Jacob Zuma at one point or the other. The reality of the matter is, whether we like it or not, former President Jacob Zuma still remains a force to be reckoned with. And a number of people in KZN still hold him in high esteem. You would also recall that even after the regional conferences, all the regions had delegates going to visit former President Jacob Zuma. And there was an issue about that, others saying that why did they go there because there was no PEC member. My response at the time was that they were not going there as the PEC, but they were going there as regional leaders. And they had all the right to do so, because as much as former President Zuma is no longer a president, but he's still a member of the ANC, and he's still a leader, and he's still someone they look up to. And then the issue of Zweli Mkhize also cannot be downplayed, because it does command support in KwaZulu-Natal. You recall that he was the premier in KwaZulu-Natal, and he didn't just become a premier, he had occupied other positions before then. So it does have support of his own. So if you bring all those supporters together, then you have something to work with. And then Zandile Gumede, of course, has proved beyond any doubt that she has in fact disappointed a number of her political adversaries, emerging victorious in the regional conference of the ANC. So those are all key people in KZN. Then lastly, to your question about the impact of the provincial government, the provincial ANC election towards the national election in December. Indeed, KwaZulu-Natal, as you indicated at the beginning of this interview, that KwaZulu-Natal is the biggest province of the ANC. eThekwini is the biggest region of the ANC. So therefore, anyone who is vying for a position in December will have vested interest in what happens in this ANC provincial conference in KwaZulu-Natal, because the numbers will definitely determine who emerges victorious come December 2022.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has never been favoured in KZN. Is it likely that, given those circumstances and the welcome he's likely to get there, is he likely to attend?
He can attend just because he's the president, but then for him to do that, then it means that they will have to make sure that he's well protected. Because honestly speaking, he's not one of the good guys in KZN. You recall after the riots last year, when he was driving from King Shaka Airport going to KwaMashu, when he addressed the masses there, he confessed, in fact, he was saying that as he was driving towards KwaMashu, people were saying, nah, the lily vendor, here is this vendor. And he indicated that such statements are not good because they are divisive. He was correct, but then of course we have to ask the question, how did that arise? And that happened because when this riot started, the president made a mistake and he referred to it as ethnic mobilization. And I'm one of the people, in fact, who was not happy about that. And I indicated that the president made a big mistake. So that did not work well for him. Of course, he's still the president of the country. So it means that he has all the right to go to any corner of this country by virtue of the fact that he's a South African first and foremost, and also by the virtue that he's the president. But I would say that maybe given the political context and the political situation, it would be better for him to delegate someone to go and conclude the conference as he has normally done in other provinces, like in the Eastern Cape, like in Limpopo and many others. So there is nothing wrong with him delegating because he has all the powers to do that since he's the sitting president of the ANC. So he has the right to delegate. He can still go, but if I were to advise him, I would advise him not to go.
Thank you very much for your insights. That was Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, UWC Professor of Political Science and Deputy Dean of Research, giving us some insights into the case.